Good evening and welcome to the Clinton Presidential Center. I'm Stephanie Street and I serve as Executive Director of the Clinton Foundation. And whether you are joining us here in person or online, we are thrilled to welcome you to tonight's very timely program, Bringing Balance Back, an important conversation about the federal budget and deficit. And as I said, it couldn't be a more timely conversation as we approach a funding deadline and a potential government shutdown. Our program is presented tonight by the Clinton Presidential Center and the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. Now, before we begin, I hope you'll allow me to introduce some special guests, and please hold your applause to the end. First, I want to recognize my first real boss, Mac McClarty, who, as you all know, served as President Clinton's first Chief of Staff, and he helped shepherd passage of the Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act of 1993, the first of many successful Clinton administration budget policies, which you will hear more about this evening. Mac, it's always a pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much. We also have with us, and I'm looking in the audience, we have Gert Clark and General Wesley Clark here. And we have Joy Pryor, Senator Mark Pryor, and the wonderful Barbara Pryor is here tonight, which is always a thrill. I want to thank you all for your service. With the United States federal debt topping $37 trillion and budget deficits projected to reach $2.5 trillion by 2035, the Congressional Budget Office projects that the national debt remains on an unsustainable upward trajectory. The Clinton administration's economic plan, which balanced the budget and created a surplus, yes, you heard that right, a surplus, while making important investments, offers a roadmap for today's policymakers. Our panel will look at the current United States economic conditions and the urgent need for bipartisan action to improve our country's fiscal trajectory. Joining us tonight are former Secretary of the Treasury Janet Yellen, who, as you know, served during the Clinton administration as the chair of the Council of Economic Advisors. We are just honored to have you here with us. And this is her first visit to the Clinton Center, so I hope you'll make her feel welcome. The former director of the Congressional Budget Office, Douglas Holtz-Eakin, who served as chief economist on the President's Council of Economic Advisors in the George W. Bush administration. And the conversation tonight will be yes. And our conversation will be moderated by Maya McGinnis, the current president of the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. And please allow me to recognize our wonderful Clinton Center donors and supporters who make important and timely conversations like this possible. We couldn't do it without you, and we're very, very grateful for your support. I also wanted to thank the staff of the Clinton Presidential Center and my colleague, Dr. Jay Barth, who is the director of the Clinton Library. Jay, thank you as always for your terrific partnership. I'm going to remind you, please, to turn off your cell phones. And to start the program, we have a special video message from Congresswoman Margolies, who serves as president of the Women's Campaign International and serves on the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. She's on the board of directors. From 1993 to 95, she was a member of the United States House of Representatives from Pennsylvania, and she cast the deciding vote in favor of President Clinton's 1993 budget proposal, which set in motion the administration's economic plan and long-term economic prosperity. What a brave and courageous vote that was, and we are all better for it. I know you're joining us, so thank you so much, Congresswoman Margolies. This, I know, is one of your ideas to have this program this evening. So I'm going to ask you all again to turn off your cell phones and please turn your attention to the screens. We'll have a brief video.
Hi, I'm Margolies. Right now, I'm at the Clinton Global Initiative, and I will explain to you became interested in the Clinton Global Initiative. I served with Bill Clinton in the early 90s, and I had a very controversial vote. It was his omnibus spending package, and it was a tie, and I broke the tie. Became very much involved in this issue and have followed Clinton and the Clinton Global Initiative for the last 20 years, which is the reason why I am here now. And it's the reason why you are there, because you're trying to figure out with the with the Committee for Responsible Federal Budget, how you can bring back balance, which is a huge issue. Anyway, good luck. I know that you will learn an amazing amount. Maya McGinnis is the best. Hi, I'm Margolies. Right now.
And so, Maya, I'm going to kick it off to you to begin our program. Thank you.
Okay, hello everybody. Can you hear me? It's good? Okay. I'm so excited. I'm telling myself that you are all here because you love fiscal policy as much as the three of us on this stage do. And I don't think I've felt that excited since, I don't know if you remember this, but about a decade or so ago, we had something called a pay-as-you-go pep rally, which also was this exciting for me. Okay, I'm going to start by putting out two basic facts I think that are indisputable. The first is that the fiscal projections are that we are on an unsustainable path. Things are going to have to change. And the second, and I know you're going to agree with me on this, certainly if not now, by the end of the evening, that we truly have the two best speakers we could have here to talk about this tonight. And I'm not kidding. So Secretary Yellen, as you know, is remarkable in all the things that she has accomplished, and to have been the head of the Council on Economic Advisors and the Treasury and the Federal Reserve, and as the most understated, most committed to public service, nicest person you will ever know. It's just, and it hasn't changed you. You're still the nicest person you will ever know, but just immensely, immensely accomplished, and a truly committed public servant. So thank you. And Doug, you're funny. He is a truly, no. Doug Holtz-Eakin.
I'm the Ed McMahon of fiscal policy.
In addition to being quite funny, also served at the Congressional Budget Office, which is my favorite federal government there is. The whole reason that I have this career is because I read a Congressional Budget Office document. They are fabulous, gripping, great. You should read them. They do not put you to sleep at night. They will change your career path. And Doug, you ran Congressional Budget Office so well, and you also are this behind-the-scenes whisperer to all the smart policies, to all the people who are trying to do smart policy in the Republican Party, I believe. But the real thing that I think is very similar about both of you is you're really committed to the issues, the truth. I have actually watched both of you tell your own parties sort of the straight deal. You lay out the policies, you care about policies, and in this increasingly polarized moment where a lot of talking points are replacing grappling with real issues, I think what both of you have done and continue to do is incredibly important. So there could not be two better people on this panel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's get into things. The fiscal health of the country is very bad, not good at all. We have debt as almost a record level as a share of GDP. It's never been this high other than right after World War II. We had then, of course, fought a world war. That is not the case this time. Deficits are the highest as a share of GDP that they've been outside of an emergency. Interest payments, fastest growing part of the federal budget, higher than national defense, the second largest item in the federal budget. Trust funds that are becoming insolvent. I don't think there's a single bit of good news on the fiscal dashboard. So I wonder, and we'll start with you, Secretary Yellen, if you could talk both a little bit about the fiscal issue, but also what I think it's very hard for people to understand why it matters. And I think that's one of the things that makes this issue so difficult, is it doesn't connect directly to people in their daily lives. But could you talk about why it matters, what the threats of this situation are, and how you see it?
Well, Maya, as you said, we have a debt situation that is unsustainable, and we run the danger of finding ourselves on a path where debt really begins to explode relative to the economy. The deficits are so large, and because now we have an aging population, Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid are rising and will continue to rise. Spending on them if we keep the programs as they are, they'll rise as a share of GDP. The deficits, the underlying deficits will grow, interest expense will grow, and we'll borrow more and more to pay the interest on the debt in a way that will be explosive. And I fear that we will lose the confidence if we don't seem committed to getting this under control, the confidence of markets, and interest rates will rise to the point where they will crowd out private investment, which will slow growth. And the interest burden will become so large that there really won't be the resources, unless we deal with this, to do other things that are important, whether it's in healthcare or education or supporting R&D or things that are important for growth. So the economy will really begin to suffer. And what happens in many countries with uncontrollable deficits, which greatly worry me now, is that the government begins to pressure the central bank to help out. And President Trump has already made clear he would like the Federal Reserve to be cutting interest rates very substantially. Why? Because, as you said, the interest on the debt is the second largest item, and wouldn't it be good if interest rates are lower? And really, this is the road to becoming a banana republic. And I worry about that for the United States, because everyone recognizes now around the world that having an independent central bank that focuses on keeping inflation low and stable and trying to make sure the labor market operates at full employment, that's what central banks should be doing. And when you pressure a central bank to help finance deficits, whether it's by printing money or holding interest rates down, you end up with inflation like we've recently seen in Turkey, or a year or two ago in Argentina, or we can go back and even to our own history during World War II and after, when the Fed was given that role and we had high inflation in the 1950s. So those are some of the reasons we should care.
Doug, do we care?
We should care. We should care a lot. There is this constellation of events that surrounds a sovereign debt crisis or something close to it that Secretary Yellen just laid out, and those are real. But often when I talk to people who don't worry about this, they say, look at Japan. Japan has tons of debt. They're fine. And I would say, do you really want to be Japan? No growth for 15 years. And if you don't have a sovereign debt crisis, that means you didn't fail. But if you didn't fail, you got a D. And we're getting a D right now. We haven't failed, but if you look at, you go back to the 20th century, a long time ago now, but in the 20th century, 1960 to 2000, we had very tight fiscal policies, and the deficits averaged about 2% of GDP. And one of the things that came out of that era was fairly rapid growth in income per capita, so that the standard of living doubled every 29 years, one working career. You could reach your version of the American dream. 21st century, it's a completely different story. Deficits are large, well over 5% of GDP on average, going north from there. And income per capita has grown much more slowly, a full percentage point slower. So the standard of living now doubles every 56 years. And you see newspaper stories all the time, and you see polling all the time that says that people will now feel like they don't have the same chance to get ahead as their parents did. It's true. And that's why we should care. Fixing this is about taking care of our children and the economy of the future. It's just that simple.
You know, it's interesting on that last point. So it's clearly an economic issue in that it slows economic growth and it squeezes out other parts of the budget, whether you want more government spending somewhere or whether you want tax cuts. It leaves you no choice if your interest payments are taking more. But also, on a generational perspective, somebody recently said, well, it's okay if we leave more debt to the next generation because they'll always do better than their parents did, so we're just asking them to contribute more. And I don't think that's true anymore, right? I think the next generation is inheriting an incredibly risky situation, an incredibly vulnerable economy where it's not at all clear that they'll be better off than they were before. And the other thing I'd put out, I'd love to know your thoughts on both of your thoughts on this, but I don't think it's just an economic issue anymore. I think it's now also a national security issue. And it feels to me that we are more vulnerable, whether it's national security threats, whether it's the Treasury market that could become weaponized, whether it's making spending decisions and investment decisions and preventive decisions on a national security level based on budgetary reasons rather than national security reasons. I think there's a whole nother layer of risk in a geopolitical environment that is much riskier than I think we thought it was a decade ago. Fair? Not fair?
Well, I think it is fair. I mean, I think there are geopolitical risks. And when you think about our children and what we're leaving to our children, the failure to address climate change is, to me, one of the most devastating things that we're leaving to our children. We need to be making investments in them so that they have the skills, the tools, the education, the training needed to be able to do well, to earn good incomes, and to hold jobs that give them the prospect of advancement. And the deficits crowd out our ability to spend on programs that are devoted to our kids and their future well-being. So much of it is devoted to retirement programs that Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security are just what the government is doing. And I do think we're failing our kids in those ways as well.
I think it's a really good point. And the politics have just changed, and I can't fully explain it. We look at the 20th century, again, go back to that period. We had emergencies. We had World War II, but we cleaned up afterwards. The politics where you took care of business, and in the process, you left the next generation of decision makers budgetary room to do the things they thought were important. Now, we had 9/11, Great Recession, pandemic. There's no cleaning up. The debt just rises, and it gets ever higher. And now there's no room for the next generation of voters to do the things they think are important. And that's really, really bad in a representative democracy. Right? You know, my daughter thinks we should have a paid leave program for every American. I don't disagree with it, but there's no money. All the money is spoken for, and that's not okay.
So I want to follow up with you on why, but just one number that the single number that sticks out, or I guess it's two numbers, in my head the most, is that we spend $6 per senior for every one we spend on children under 18 at the federal level. And as you were just talking about looking forward, that ratio will become worse, not better over time in terms of what we've pre-committed to the budget. And so if you think that a national budget is the priority of your country's values, I don't think that's what most people would say are or should be our values, but they are if you look at the budget. But you bring up this excellent point that we used to have balancing the budget over the business cycle as a goal, or you would borrow when there was an emergency and then not when the emergency was over. Why did that change? Do either of you have observations about the deterioration in the commitment to the issue?
So
I blame you.
That's not fair. There's got to be a better reason. Tell us.
So to me, part of the underlying dynamic has to do with an aging population. And this is something we have known about for decades. And during the Clinton administration, we always understood that there was something we were going to have to deal with, not then, but 20, 30 years later, which is now, which is that the ratio of dependence of old people to young working people was going to be rising, and it was going to give rise to what you just described, a world in which Social Security, Medicaid, and Medicare would grow as a share of GDP. So it's not only that we've become more generous, it's we have an aging population. And then on top of that, we knew, and I think it continues, that healthcare costs rise more rapidly than inflation. And so the combination of those two things, to me, plus interest, that interest expense is higher than it was certainly after the financial crisis for a long time. Those things are really working to push up the deficit, and it's not so much a change in priorities, although we have had substantial tax cuts, the benefits of which mainly have gone to upper income people. I think that we couldn't afford.
Mm-hmm. Other than blaming me?
No, I've actually thought a lot about this, because this literally happened on my watch. We entered 2001. The budget had been balanced under President Clinton, and since then we have done nothing but had very poor budgetary outcomes. And I was in the Bush administration. I then ran the CBO. I was on the John McCain presidential campaign and watched this carefully during that period. And I just want to say as clearly as I can, one of the things that changed was presidential leadership. And I want everyone in this room to know that it is now clearly recognized that we did not have leaders like Bill Clinton. And if you go back and look at the budgets of the Bush administration, which I worked in, and budget is policy, always, those budgets said we were going to win the war against global terror, and they didn't say much else about the deficit. I think if you look through the Obama administration, those budgets said as long as the rich pay their fair share, we're good. And I think that wasn't that simple. Please do not look at the budgets of the first Trump administration. Then he never said a word about deficit or debts, even in the State of the Union. The Biden administration didn't have a way to get even at full employment, to get the deficit down, and was not vocal about that being a problem. This president, again, in his second term in office, is not talking about it. So we haven't had in the 21st century the most important public educator, the most important leader, stand up and say to the American people, the federal budget is a problem, and it's a problem for you and your families, and we need to do something about it. That's just been missing, and that's got to change.
I have thought about the reason of the deterioration and never really known. I think you're exactly right. It changed. That was not the priority of any administration after the Clinton administration. Yeah, okay, well, at least
And
now we know.
One of the questions is, what are the lessons do you learn? I think they learned the wrong lesson from the success in balancing the budget. Because each time there was even a flicker of interest, like, the Tea Party reared its ugly head and they said, oh, we're going to get serious about deficit, or, one thing or another like that. What they did is they tried to rerun the late 90s playbook. They say, okay, we're going to do caps on discretionary spending. Well, as Secretary Yellen just said, if you look at the federal budget now, there's very little annual discretionary spending. It's like $1 out of every $5. Those decisions are small now. They were the majority of the budget then. You could fix things. And so not only was it a success, it was a very rational approach to the policy problem. Here's the problem. Here's the tool. Let's get to balance. Every time they tried to do something after that, they went for the wrong part of the budget, and they failed predictably, and so then they started giving up.
Sounds depressingly accurate.
That's what I do. That's what I do. I'm one of the leading causes of alcoholism in the United States.
Okay, let's go on to a cheerier topic. Everybody in our political leadership's willingness to fix and embrace the need to reform Social Security and Medicare. Oh, wait, there's none. There's none. So it really used to be that sort of Democrats didn't want to talk about the issues and Republicans wanted to, and Republicans didn't want to talk about raising taxes and Democrats are willing to. But quite frankly now, neither party is willing to talk about either, other than Democrats talking about the top 2% of tax increases. It's not broad-based. So both parties have learned, at the same time there's been a loss of presidential leadership. I think it's accurate to say both parties have learned that politically it's just really beneficial to give away things and not talk about either side of the hard choices the way that at least there used to be kind of two boxes of it. But on Social Security and Medicare in particular, we have a president now from the Republican Party who says, I'm not touching them, and in fact has done things. There have been, just the tax bill that they just passed, put aside the trillions of borrowing, it actually brings forward the date of insolvency of Social Security because it has policies in it that does so. So there is no political will to talk about Social Security and Medicare reform. We desperately need to make changes. You were saying it was, in the future. It's not much in the future now. 7 years from now, Social Security will face across-the-board benefit cuts of 24% for every single person. That is devastating for somebody who depends on the program. What do we do? And also, just, you both have worked in the trenches, and you see how people have to balance the politics and the policy. Talk a little bit about how that works.
So, during the Clinton administration, there was bipartisan cooperation to balance the budget. And it occurred after years in which you had had several government shutdowns, rancorous relations between Republicans and Democrats. I think going into President Clinton's second term, you might have wondered, would it ever be possible for the two sides to agree with one another, to make some kind of deal? Things didn't look good, and yet we got the 1997 budget agreement. There was bipartisan cooperation. I think we got to a point where it wasn't advantageous for either side to prolong the process of not dealing with the deficit, and there was a mutual desire to see, could we balance the budget? And as rancorous as politics are now, as you said, both sides have said they value Social Security. They don't want to cut Social Security. But the Social Security Trust Fund is scheduled to run out of money in 2032. Similarly, the Hospital Trust Fund, Medicare Part A, is going to run out of money in 2032. And financial markets are getting very nervous about, all three credit rating agencies have downgraded U.S. debt. We've seen some spikes in interest rates suggesting nervousness on the part of markets about our ability to deal with the debt. And I think this could eventually lead to a situation where there is another attempt at bipartisan collaboration to deal with this. Social Security, I think President Clinton placed very high priority on trying to fix Social Security. We didn't get there. One of the reasons we didn't get there was because at the time, the Republicans were very focused on privatizing Social Security, going to a system with individual accounts, and President Clinton and the Democrats wanted to keep the defined benefit structure. Perhaps now, given that both sides seem opposed to cuts in Social Security benefits, and any interest in privatizing Social Security, it looks to me like it's dead. The public's not interested in it. I don't think Republicans are interested. There are some reasonable things that might be done to deal with Social Security, raising somewhat the cap on the ceiling where you pay Social Security to bring the wage base back to 90% of total wages in the U.S. economy. Lifespans have increased, especially for higher income people. Perhaps there could be agreement on raising the retirement age somewhat for higher income people who have experienced this increase in life expectancy. This is not an easy fix. There are monies that are going as pass-through income that are not paying Social Security tax. You know, both on the revenue side and on the spending side, I think it might be possible, especially with the clock ticking and people feeling we've got to do something about this to get some bipartisan cooperation.
So let me tell you a couple of my personal fantasies. I think the interesting thing about the Social Security is not the technical thing. You know, we could sit down and do Social Security reform between the two of us in about 15 minutes. When I was CBO director and George W. Bush was trying to get it changed, I ride the metro every day and do the reforms in my head. That's not the hard part, it's the politics. And the politics have been that you can't touch Social Security or Medicare, but Social Security, let's stick with that. And so, you know, in a world where the president hasn't stood up and said the deficit's a big deal, no president stood up and said Social Security's a big deal, if you're a congressman, and you go back to the town hall and say, you know, I'd really like to do Social Security reform, you're working at the Tasty Freeze in about 2 weeks. I mean, it's over. But right now, if you're 55 and you want to retire at 65, you don't know what your Social Security benefit's going to be, because we are going to do Social Security reform in the next 7 years. And so increasingly, people are going to go to that same town hall and say, hey, what's the deal? What am I going to get? When are you going to fix this? And when the retail politics change like that, and it flips from don't touch it to, hey, when are you going to touch it? We need to know the answer. That's completely different. And I'm looking forward to that moment. I think it's a very important moment for this country. There's some added pieces. Number one, they'll have to campaign on this. Whoever's going to run for president in 2028 had better be prepared to do this on their watch. So they're going to have to actually mention a policy issue in a campaign, and that's how we do education. Those are teachable moments in the United States. So I think that'll be a good thing. And you can't fix Social Security with these special budgetary procedures called reconciliation. You can't ram it through on a party line vote. They're going to have to talk to each other. So those are going to be completely different policy-driven conversations that we haven't seen for, and I think that's a good thing. And I think that'll change the environment. And then the key, I think, is for these big pieces of legislation, it's the White House and White House leadership. One of the things that I've bemoaned, my wife is a former OMB budget official, and so we have scintillating conversations about budget process. I'm going to stop there. But one of the things that President Clinton did was he drafted legislation and sent it to the Hill. Like, here's what I want. Take this. That's a huge favor to Congress. Because number one, they can go back to their district and say, I didn't want to do this. The president asked us to. And by the way, they set up this bill. It's all wrong. They don't know how to do anything. And they can claim victories in fixing it in the markup and the passage process. Both houses can do that. And then the White House, and only the White House, can broker the deal between the House and the Senate. And only the White House can go to their party and say, I get it. This is a bad vote. I'll campaign for you. We'll take care of this. And only the president can go to the other side and say, what has to be in there for me to sign? And know the bright lines. And that's not, we haven't seen that kind of operation very much recently. And so we don't get bipartisanship. There's no attempt to do it. Now, this is not entirely a fantasy, because that's exactly what President Biden did on the infrastructure bill. 3 times he called the Senate over and said, what is the deal? We want this bill. Finally, the Republicans said, look, you can't touch the 17 Act. He said, it's off limits. Democrats said, well, they keep going after this. They said, okay, here's the deal. And then he went and got the votes in the House. It can be done. And I think we're going to need to do this in Social Security. And I'm optimistic that we can get this done in Social Security. You have to be optimistic to be a budget guy, because we don't get a lot of wins. But you know, that's an important moment, because you and I both know the minute you say we're going to do something on Social Security, AARP is going to be screaming, it's not fair to do this only on the seniors. You can't do it. And they're going to have to look at everything. And we need to look at everything. So that'll be fine. So this is the window. And this is the window where we can change the trajectory and take off the table the things that I think we should be properly scared of. Last thing I'll say, and then I'll stop filibustering. A long time ago, we got downgraded by S&P Global because they said, you know, you guys have really rotten politics, and this Tea Party is making it tough, and you close the government. And then not long ago, Fitch did the same thing. They said, the politics make financial management impossible. You're not able to politically manage your finances. We just got downgraded by Moody's. They didn't say anything like that. They said, you have too much debt, and too much of your revenue is eaten up by interest costs. The problem's no longer the process, it's the problem, and we got to fix the problem.
So many important things you said there that just made me think of things. The biggest is how Social Security is an issue that's going to be able to be flipped. But let me just comment on a couple things. First, you said there are not many wins in budget world. And it's just so true that I kid you not, our slogan at the office is, it would have been worse. Like we go and we work our hearts out on every issue and we lose every single time. But we are convinced that it would have been a little bit worse if we hadn't been out there pushing it back in the other direction. That's hard to rally the troops every day to work so hard. There haven't been any wins, none, on fiscal policy in a really long time, and we're gonna have to break that. But I think you pointed out something so important about Social Security, which is when you say to people, we've gotta fix the debt. If we don't fix the debt, it's gonna make the economy worse, it's gonna be bad for the budget, it leaves us less prepared for the next pandemic or emergency. And they say, or there'll be inflation. They're like, okay, so what do we have to do to fix it? You say, well, we have to raise your taxes and cut your spending. They say, okay, well, we'll just wait for the other scenario. It's, you know, it's not that great. But with Social Security, when you say, well, what's gonna happen is your benefits or your parents is gonna be cut by 24%, that's not okay. And so I do think people will start showing up at the town halls. So this is the one piece of the overall fiscal pie that I think you can build a constituency for. I also will say I have been shocked that the ARP is so counterproductive on it. Any member of Congress who says, can we talk about the retirement age? You know, when Social Security started, retirement age was 65, life expectancy was 62. So it was going to work.
Great program.
Things have changed, but the ARP will like phone bank anybody who says anything about a fix, and I think that's a real issue. The Committee for Responsible Federal Budget, the project I'm most excited about is that we're starting a whole tell the truth on Social Security. And we are going out across the states, usually we're kind of Washington focused, but we are going state to state and talking about Social Security, frankly inspired by something that Bill Clinton did when he was president. And he partnered with AARP at the time, who had a lot of good people who aren't there anymore, unfortunately. I wish they were that productive, but we'll ask them to partner. And we're gonna go talk about this, and we're gonna publish a list of every member of Congress, and it's not, oh, you have a plan, you voted to raise the retirement age, just someone who's willing to say we have a problem and we should address it. That's how low the bar is right now, but I think that that will start to get more people engaged in this issue, so I'm hopeful about that. Okay, next question, but before I do, I just wanna warn everybody, we're about to go to the audience participation portion, so be ready. There's going to be a flash poll. But here's a question I have for both of you. I think about this all the time. There's so many budget myths, so many of the talking points that people put out there are just ridiculous. You know, don't worry, we can just print money, all tax cuts pay for themselves, all these different things. What's the biggest budget myth that you think stands in the way of us moving this issue forward? What do you wish like people understood that they don't about the budget?
So let me give you two things. I think a lot of people feel the budget is just filled with waste, fraud, and abuse. And, you know, this is something that Elon Musk has recently popularized, and I can come in here and cut out all of this useless spending and save trillions of dollars, and that's really going to do it. And I think, as Doug pointed out earlier, portion of the budget where people look for the waste, fraud, and abuse is in discretionary spending. And non-defense discretionary spending at this point is as low a share of GDP as it was in 1962. There just isn't much there. It's under $1 trillion, and there really isn't much left to cut. So there's no way to deal with this problem by doing waste, fraud, and abuse. It's, although there may be some in Medicare as well that we could go after, but it's raising more revenue, it's dealing with Social Security and Medicare. The other thing that I wish people understood more is that we could really make a big dent on dealing with the deficit if we properly resourced the Internal Revenue Service so that they had the resources they need to collect the tax revenue that is due under our existing tax law. And the estimate is that there is about $700 billion a year of taxes we do not collect due to essentially fraud. And the IRS is so under-resourced that your odds of being audited are very close to zero. The Biden administration focused very heavily on trying to fix that. And we felt that they needed long-term funding to be able to hire the kind of people, the tax lawyers, the accountants, the artificial intelligence specialists, and the like, who could really focus on enforcement and begin to close that tax gap. And we succeeded in the Inflation Reduction Act in getting $80 billion over the next decade for the Internal Revenue Service, and started a program of fixing the agency, modernizing its technology, really focusing on enforcement. And this is not the loss of tax revenue, what we're not gaining. This is not people who go to work every day and get a W-2 at the end of the year. That's not where this is. This is wealthy people, businesses, complex partnerships that take a while to be able to come to grips with that. And from the outset, the Republicans were opposed to this funding, and now it has all completely disappeared. So one of the things about the big, beautiful bill is that it was is that it took away every penny of the money that had been given to the IRS to close this tax gap. That's where the low-hanging fruit is. And for people who are worried about the budget deficit, this is a complete no-brainer that we should be resourcing the IRS and going after that revenue.
Speaker Smith, you'd like to bust?
The waste, fraud, and abuse, for sure, it's the same thing. But similar in its character is there's always this notion that somehow the federal budget's just like the family sitting down at the kitchen table and figuring it out. No, it's not. It's a fifth of the economy. It's enormously complicated. And anybody who is told that then watches it come out so poorly and thinks, well, if it's that easy, I can balance my budget and they can't balance theirs. They're either terribly inept or they're corrupt. And it really, I think, is unfair to the members of Congress. Like, this is a very hard thing. It's a very large thing. It's a complicated animal, and it will require sustained effort and expertise to fix it. People need to know that, because things that are hard take time sometimes. And if they didn't fix it in a year, there's a reason for that. So I think we've greatly misled the American people about what's on the table here. This is hard.
Okay, flash poll time, because we are ending the fiscal year tomorrow, and if we don't fund the government will shut down. So I thought it would be interesting to see everybody in the audience who thinks we're going to have a government shutdown, raise your hand. Hey. No one on this stage? Everyone who thinks we're not going to have a government shutdown, raise your hand. Ooh, we are in the distinct minority, and you're not voting?
We're drinking with those guys.
I'm not voting, I'm voting with them. we got till midnight tomorrow. That's it.
Well, it is shocking to me that we are at this point once again where we are. It is quite plausible that we will shut down the government because our lawmakers and our leaders cannot agree on anything. And I would suggest, and I'd love to hear a little bit of your thoughts on this, but I think it's become so much harder to deal with this issue than it used to be because of the level of polarization. And I think what it takes to deal with the fiscal policy is a willingness to focus on policy rather than politics. And because we know this doesn't make good politics unless you have a president who puts the issue out there in a way and turns it around so it is good politics and it's necessary, and we've lost that. You have to focus on the long term because a fiscal deal actually hurts the economy for a few years before it starts to help it in perpetuity. So you have to focus on the long term, not the short term. You have to care about the next generation. You have to be willing to compromise instead of kind of dig in your hole and your extremes, and you have to be willing to make hard choices instead of celebrate free lunches. And it just feels like this moment that we're in politically is the opposite of that, that the increasing level of partisanship and polarization means we're losing the very traits that allow you to make a deal. And so I wanted to kind of bring in, how do you think the polarization is affecting where we are in our ability to make these hard choices? You could also apply that same thing to climate or any other tough choices that are there on the agenda, how we don't seem to do it much. I look at it as the 3 Ds. We are dealing with division, dysfunction, and distrust, and it is just eating away at our ability to govern.
Well, I totally agree with you. I've never seen such distrust and polarization. But on the other hand, I do remember in 2023, we had a debt ceiling. We were coming up against it. To breach the debt ceiling, to not be able to raise it, is potentially catastrophic from the standpoint of the economy and financial markets. And that was a situation when most Republicans, so you had some people who said, fine, go ahead, breach the debt ceiling, I don't care, I'm, not going to deal with the other side. But a lot of Republicans were worried about breaching the debt ceiling, as Democrats were. And a deal did come together. And people were reasonable, they were practical. It wasn't a huge deal, it didn't solve all of our problems, but both sides gave some things they weren't happy to do. There were some work requirements put into welfare that the Democrats weren't enthusiastic about, as an example. But they did get an agreement. It was bipartisan. The debt ceiling was raised. So when I'm hopeful about our current situation, it's that I could imagine a moment, not right now, but in the coming years, when a bipartisan compromise could be possible.
That's a great point, and that actually was kind of the biggest amount of savings that we'd had in over a decade that came out of that debt ceiling. Yeah, and you got to be the Secretary of Treasury where there wasn't a default, which is a great accomplishment. So great.
On my resume,
yes. What do you think?
So I don't think we're going to get shut down, and here's why. This is totally inside baseball, and I apologize for it. We've been on a continuing resolution during all of Trump's presidency so far. If they do a full year CR, which is what the White House wanted, that would be 2 straight years that the appropriators didn't get to do their job. That's the most bipartisan group you're going to find in the House and the Senate, and he's trying to put them out of business. I mean, he's always trying to consolidate power, and they know it. And so it is in their interests to get more time to do the appropriations.
Oh, you think they'll get the appropriations done?
So I think they will give a clean CR to get more time to actually do the appropriations, and then at the end of that, we will do a big omnibus bill, and both sides will revert to their worst instincts and buy each other off.
Throw a bunch of stuff in it.
Yes. And so the fiscal responsibility part is going to leave, that train's going to leave in November. They're not going to pay attention, but they'll buy each other off and be done.
Sorry, they're going to do something on healthcare in your view, Deb? Or?
Yeah.
They'll extend those.
Yeah.
Oh, so it's too complicated for another flash poll, but it'd be interesting to see how much we're going to blow up the budget at the end of the calendar year, because that would be a fair bet that there's going to be a lot of stuff stuffed in that.
Or maybe it might have been Secretary Yellen said we were going to get $2.5 trillion by 10 years from now or something like that. We're going to get $2.5 trillion next year. That's my forecast.
Oof.
as I said.
Just one thing that still blows my mind, just one really simple fact, which is we don't pass budgets in this country anymore. We don't pass budgets. The president actually didn't submit a full budget this year. It goes unnoticed that we don't pass budgets.
He did a mid-session update to a non-existent budget.
Yeah, right?
What was that?
You can't run a small company. You can't run anything without a budget, and yet the single biggest economy in the world operates most years without a budget now. And people don't really notice. It's just stunning. Let's talk a little bit about the independent institutions, which play a remarkably important role in our country. The Federal Reserve, absolutely. BLS, CBO, they have all been sort of under assault, under attack. The CEA has been more politicized recently in this administration. If you look at some of the reports they've put out, they were not credible. We're sort of tracking some of the claims compared to what will really happen, but CEA has been one of the less political parts of the executive until more recently. I mean, it goes up and down. But this strikes me as very dangerous. The law, I mean, again, my favorite government program, CBO, so of course I don't like it. But talk a little bit about what you think is happening, sort of the pressure, the bullying, the attacks on institutions. What does this mean for our democracy and our ability to have independent decision-making? Because both of you have run these incredible institutions very well.
Well, I'll just start off. I consider it really terrifying. The world relies, financial markets, investors all over the world in the data that they have on the US economy that's produced by the federal government. It is the core to our understanding of what's happening in the US economy, and we have truly competent and devoted civil servants who work with very limited resources to do the best they can to produce statistics to give insight on the economy and to politicize that or to withhold data or to try to appoint people who will corrupt that process. Really, I think this just undermines global confidence in the US. The Council of Economic Advisors was created by Congress to be a little agency in the White House that was supposed to tell the president and senior officials the truth, even if it was something they didn't want to hear. So when policies are under consideration, what is the downside of these policies? What could be the unexpected and adverse consequences? Do the benefits of the policies, when you measure them as carefully as you can, actually exceed the costs of the policies? The CEA involved in every economic decision, often the skunk at the table, saying all the things that nobody else wants to hear who's in favor of policies, and these are costly, they're really not a good idea. And it's important to have truth tellers at the table who are willing to say things that many people think will not be served to advance their careers. And the Fed is the most important of them all. As I said previously, I think, solid monetary policy that keeps inflation as low and stable as possible and promotes an economy that's operating at full employment. This is core to the United States' success and the confidence that the world has in investing in the United States, in holding the dollar, and the dollar serving as a reserve currency, in being willing to absorb the $37 trillion of debt that we have and not worry that inflation is going to eat away the real value of that debt. And the Federal Reserve It's independent, but the independence is very limited. It's not independent in choosing goals or objectives. Those are set by Congress, but the settings of two of the policy instruments to achieve those goals of price stability and full employment, that's where the Fed's independence lies. And we know from historical experience, both in the US and around the world, that when central banks don't have independence, you have political business cycles that politicians will stimulate the economy in the run-up to an election, with the inflationary consequences coming after the election, and often try to use their central bank to help finance deficits and interest on the debt, and you end up with very higher hyperinflation. And the threat that exists right now to the Federal Reserve is extremely serious. There's a case that's going to the Supreme Court. If the Supreme Court rules essentially in favor of the Trump appeal, what we will have is a situation in which a president can choose any member of the Federal Reserve Board, decide he wants to get rid of that person, launch some allegation of misconduct against that person. Whether it has any merit or not, it would take years to adjudicate what the merits are. In the meantime, the individual would be removed from serving on the board, and after several months with a vacant position, if the Senate goes along with it, the president can replace the person and appoint someone else. And that really is the absolute end of Fed independence. So I think this is a very, very serious situation with very huge downside risk to the United States.
I echo everything the Secretary just said. I mean, especially with the Fed, it's an extraordinarily dangerous moment in my view. So we can watch that. I just want to tell your staffers that they're just like the CEA. I've worked at the CEA twice, both H.W. Bush and W. And 90% of what you do is kill bad ideas. And so when you see what comes out and you don't like it, you should see what didn't come out. Just saying. So it would have been worse. And that's what the CEA does. That's what the CEA does. That's what the CBO is designed to do. It is by statute, nonpartisan, does not make policy recommendations. It is just the facts. And I'm incredibly proud to have led that institution. And I'm incredibly proud of the job it continues to do. And people ask me all the time if I'm, upset about the sort of berating of the CBO that goes on. And the truth is, it's par for the course. Some members I very much respect and still think of fondly said some things about me that we're not going to repeat tonight. But it's just, that's part of your job.
I know it's par for the course, but it hurts me to watch it because these are good people who like to work in spreadsheets, who are just doing their jobs.
Congress, and Congress has enormous pressures on it. And sometimes you fill this sort of psychosocial role of being the dog they get to kick. They're just venting. It's fine. It's not personal. It's fine.
Well, I think you handled that well, and you protected your staff really well. But I think the staff of the CBO they're just such great budget nerds. I want everybody to quit.
It is the nerdiest thing in Washington. There's no question about that.
Okay, we are
nerdy too.
And the great nerds.
It's very nerdy.
Celebration of nerds. So we are short on time. In fact, we're over time, but I'm going to still ask two final questions. And you can choose to answer one or both, but they're the juiciest of the whole thing, which is, one, how would you fix it? What's the most important thing that you think we should do? And two, are there any stories from behind the scenes in your days in White Houses or doing public service that you would like to share with us that you probably shouldn't, but you want to anyhow?
Oh, I'll start.
Okay.
So when I was the CBO director, I was commuting from Syracuse, so my family wasn't there, and I don't have much of a life, so I would get to the office about 5 a.m.
Oh my God.
And on this particular day, I was at the office for a while, and then I flew from DC to San Francisco to give a talk and have a dinner at the San Francisco Fed, which at that time had a president named Janet Yellen. And so, given the travel and the dinner, which I think was or the speech was at 7 and then the dinner was after, by the time we got to sort of sitting down and stuff, I was at nearly 24 hours up body time, and I was running out of gas, and I told Janet this. And what she said to me was, "Keep drinking, Doug, we want to hear the truth." And that's how I ended up here.
Perfect. You got any stories you want to tell about Doug? Or would you also like to say the most important thing you think we should do to fix the situation, if you don't want to tell any tales?
The budget
situation. Or the polarized situation, which probably needs to be fixed in order to fix the budget situation. You have a glimmer of optimism in everything, which I really think we need to end on that note. So just tell us something that we can hold on to feel okay.
So I guess my feeling is that bipartisan compromise is possible, even when there is a lot of partisan rancor. And I think we saw it in 1997. I think it was a great triumph to have gotten the 1997 budget deal done. It balanced the budget earlier than it was expected to, and for 4 years we actually had surpluses. And as I mentioned, in 2023, actually reasonable people came to the table, bargained, got along with one another. Some friendships formed. Back in 1997, I remember Erskine Bowles and John Kasich on opposite sides worked very closely together, actually developed a strong relationship, were practical, looked for solutions. I saw the same thing in 2023. The people working together actually got to like one another, worked together very constructively. I believe it can happen again. But I do think something about the clock or outside pressure is going to be needed in order to generate that. It could be, as we were talking about the deadlines on exhaustion of the trust funds, I think that could be something that motivates change. Unfortunately, I do believe it could be market pressures also that come into play, especially if the pressure on the Federal Reserve continues in the way I hope it won't. But I think when there are market pressures, it will concentrate minds very powerfully, and there will be a meaningful response.
I want to wholeheartedly endorse that and emphasize just one piece of it. I think people often mistake bipartisanship with we agree on the policies. That's not it at all. The agreement is to get to a piece of legislation and get the work done. We agree to finish the job. And it's just as important as you make those deals, you know what you gave up and you know what you got for it. And that's a very important process. And to do that, you have to talk to each other. And if we can get an event where they start talking to each other, they're talking about policy, not finger pointing, I think that happens again.
Okay, well, that is a wonderful note to end on. Please join me in thanking these two folks. Thank you. No. No, but really, I did just want to say, it is so important to understand the two of you have contributed absolutely so much. So thank you for coming today, and thank you for all that you have done for the country.
Thank you.
And thank you, three, for reminding us why presidential centers exist, which is really having great, thoughtful conversations about complex issues in a nonpartisan way, in a multi-partisan way. And with linkages back to the administration whose story we tell here in the museum and in the records that are held here. So thank you all so much. So thank you to Secretary Janet Yellen. Thank you to Douglas Holtz-Eakin. And Maya McGinnis, thank you for a great facilitation of this conversation. And thank you to everyone at the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget for a great partnership around this program. So thank you all, and we hope we can do it again. Stephanie rightfully thanked the donors here who helped make a lot of these programs happen. I would be remiss if I didn't thank everybody in this room as taxpayers, because you help what happens in my part of this operation at the Clinton Presidential Library and Museum make it happen. You pay our salaries and you provide our operating expenses, and we are very conscious of that 36 hours before a deadline. So thank you all. Please, please, please drive safely. We can't wait to see you back here at the Clinton Presidential Center. Have a great night.